Minadaya lave wonton, Minadaya lave wonton, lave wonton. Minada lave wonton, Minada sariaje, Amason kote.
And Dele is originally from Nigeria.
Still from Nigeria.
Still from Nigeria, right. And he is going to be talking to us today about Nigeria and about Africa as a whole. And he is with the African Center for Global Affairs. So tell me, Dele, in your viewpoint, what are the most pressing issues for the continent of Africa?
That's an overwhelming question. There are quite a couple of issues which I would say that are of profound urgency to the continent of Africa. But perhaps as a general introduction, one should talk about this continent with a population of nearly 1 billion people on the continent of Africa, and another perhaps about 300 million black people scattered all over the world, what we call the black diaspora. Looking at the African continent, especially for people outside that continent, the images that are evoked immediately are those of hunger, of wars, of what people would call ethnic rivalries, of religious tension. But very more popular is the question of the devastation, the plague, the catastrophe of HIV/AIDS on the continent of Africa. Until very recently, maybe the very early part of 1990, you're looking at a continent where most of the governments in the different countries of Africa were what people would describe as military dictatorships. Of course, there has been a recent trend, a kind of wind of civilian governments taking the reign of affairs in those countries. Whether that means progress in terms of the lives of the people, or the real meaning of these democracies to the lives of the people, is another matter that perhaps we are going to be talking about in the course of this program. So I'm looking at the healthcare crisis on the African continent. We are looking at a situation where perhaps out of 50 million people infected by HIV/AIDS globally, about 2/3 of them are said to be living on the African continent, which means you're looking at an estimated population of about 30 million people, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. When you take this picture of the Holocaust of HIV/AIDS ravaging the lives of the people of Africa, and you aggregate that with all the other problems already facing the continent, the kind of strangulated prescription of the IMF and the World Bank, the kind of dictates of those monetary institutions, the ravaging poverty, the penury that the people of the continent are subjected to, you begin to conjure a picture that is not very inspiring. That is the continent that we are looking at. Perhaps one will go into more specifics as we go along on the program.
Yes, yes, I think that most people are aware of the terrible tragedy of the HIV infection in Africa. Can we have the map of the whole of Africa showing its relationship to the Middle East and to Europe? We have a picture that our viewers are going to see on the screen in a few moments of the continent of Africa. And we can see there that the Middle East, of course, is to the north, and you can see just at the top of the screen on the left-hand side, as you're viewing it, is just the bottom, the southern part of Spain. And can you tell me, Dele, what countries does Africa trade the most with?
Fortunately and unfortunately, the major trading partner, which is of course by design, that Africa has dealings with, is not the Middle East, which is the immediate neighbor to the African countries, as you are saying. It's not Spain. Take Nigeria, for instance. The largest buyer of Nigeria's oil is the United States of America. So some of the largest trading partners of the African countries is the United States and the major countries of Europe. And of course, the historical basis for that is very clear. The United Kingdom, France, and all of them were colonialists to the African countries. So the relationship between most of the countries of Africa, especially in the West African area, and these major superpowers have long been established. Indeed, in the colonial days, all the major agricultural products of a country like Nigeria, of Ghana, and so many other West African countries were directed towards feeding the industry. In the United Kingdom, the success of the United Kingdom in the area of textiles, Manchester, for instance, in the United Kingdom is a well-known area for textile production. But a lot of the cotton that fed that industry was on the back of the farmers of Africa. So the same thing with oil. I think the United States is one of the largest trading partners with Nigeria in terms of petroleum resources, which of course is sold cheaply to the United States. It's part of the issues that a lot of Pan-Africanists have been talking about, that part of the tragedy of the economics of Africa is that we have never been able to successfully promote intra-regional trade, which means that African countries should trade more actively with the African nations. That has not been possible. And of course, the way the politics of economists go, whether you look at coffee, cotton, whichever product you are looking at, especially in the agricultural areas, the prices that the African nations get for these agricultural products are very low. For the farmer in Kenya, for instance, who spends the whole of 1 year or more than a year trimming the coffee trees, preparing the plant, drying the coffee, and so on and so forth. At the end of the day, when a cup of coffee is picked by any of us in any of the coffee shops in the urban centers of America, if that cup of coffee costs $1, the Kenyan farmer who sweated most to get that product out to where it is gets perhaps about less than 10 cents. I mean, to look at what is called trade between Europe or America in terms of fairness, there is no such thing. I mean, it is clearly lopsided. It is the paradigm, the very paradigm of exploitation. And so when we speak to some of our activists here in Western Europe and in America, and they say we are fighting for fair trade, some of us just laugh, because how are you going to obtain fair trade? It is never going to be possible in the trade between such a major superpower with well-established infrastructures of business and the rural farmer in Africa. You are hoping that there's going to be fair trade, but the burden of ensuring that there is a change, a profound change in the economic relationship between Europe, America, and most African countries, I do not think should depend on the vision of the United States White House or on Capitol Hill. No, I think it is going to depend on African governments deciding that a different destiny has to be shaped for African governments, for African people, by African leaders themselves. Because for too long, we've been waiting for these international negotiations to effect changes. Look at the African trade, the African Growth and Opportunity Act called the AGOA, which was an initiative that was that came out of the United States Congress. Every country that attempted to take this opportunity, I do not know any nation in Africa that will say that the African Growth and Opportunity Act has been a benefit. No. The cotton farmers in a couple of West African nations are saying at the same time that the U.S. Congress was pushing what is termed the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA, subsidies were being given, huge subsidies were being given to U.S. farmers in a way that renders useless whatever was being imported from those West African countries. The imbalance in this trade, or the very idea, it should not even be called trade at all, no, because the whole relationship is completely exploitational in nature. They cannot be described as trade. So to go back to your original questions, it is not any of the neighboring regions around the African continent that are the major trading partners with Africa, with the continent, no. Rather, Shell Oil, Mobil, Chevron are leading, for instance, in the exploitation of the petroleum resources of Nigeria. There is very little participation of African people. Whether you are a cotton farmer in West Africa, your focus is how to ship it to the United States. So there is hardly any real active trading going on between these African nations. But I think the African Union is acting to see how that can be corrected. I do not think it is going to be very soon.
So given the power of the first world and their ability to wield that power on third world and even second world countries, in your opinion then, if I'm reading you correctly, the gradient to a gradient to raising the standard of living for the individual African would be intercontinental trade, in other words, or intracontinental trade. If the countries of Africa started to trade amongst themselves, would that be the best way right now to increase the standard of living? In
fact, a lot of studies have proved that African nations, especially a study was done in the West African area, will by far benefit more by trading with themselves. That just happens to be the concrete fact. They will benefit more by trading with themselves. But that is where the issue of the global geopolitics comes into effect. People will, some of us, we say, well, when we want to always qualify when we say first, second, or third world, because some people will say, no, the cradle of civilization is on the other side, and they should be regarded as first world. But that is not, that is another matter. But it is very, very clear that there is the factor of imperialism. There is the factor of neo-colonial domination in the lives of African people. We are talking of raising the quality of lives of African people. Take, for instance, something that is clearly a crime against humanity, the price of the drugs to combat HIV and AIDS. As you and I are speaking here, I am sure that on the African continent, maybe just for this day alone, it's possible that perhaps as many as 5,000 people will be dead just in one day from the scourge of HIV and AIDS. That almost about 20 million people infected with HIV/AIDS on the African continent have no access to any serious kind of medical treatment. But while this Holocaust is going on, while the lives of the people of on the African continent is being ravaged by this disease, the pharmaceutical companies, the major pharmaceutical companies, are engaged in the debate on what is called patent rights. That is what occupies the interest and the focus of the major pharmaceutical companies on the in the halls of in the business in the conference halls of Manhattan and Wall Street. That is what they are talking about. But why should African nations not on their own break away from whatever is called the international patent right? Because what is at stake here is the lives of their people. But because of the kind of leadership on the African continent, they engage in this debate on patent rights. Patent rights when some whole populations of some African towns and villages are about to be completely wiped away. And anybody listening to the pharmaceutical industry engaged in the debate over patent rights, intellectual property, and the rest of that nonsense, with a continent where about 30 million people are infected with HIV/AIDS. But that shows you that shows the kind of mentality that we are dealing with. I mean, it's going to take a complete reorientation, a paradigm shift. Neoliberalism, as difficult as it is for people to swallow, neoliberal policies is not going to help the process of survival of the African people. No, it is going to be something different, which means, for instance, they must be willing very courageously to collectively, not only African nations, perhaps it's going to be a decision by people of color predominantly. India is beginning to record very rapidly increasing rate of infection of HIV/AIDS. And there are laboratories in India that says we can bring down the cost of the HIV, of drugs for HIV and AIDS. But they are tied to the intellectual property. Brazil has made progress in this. I mean, our own position at the African Center for Global Policies is that there should be a conference of Asian countries that are whose population are rapidly and predominantly affected by the HIV/AIDS scourge, and then nations of Latin America and African countries sitting together to collectively make a decision and call off the bluff, challenge the major pharmaceutical industry, break away with them, and find out how to rescue the humanity of their people. But we are talking of imperialism and neoliberal policies, and that is kind of, I mean, it is worse than ridiculous. It is inexplicable that in the face of this scourge, in the face of this plague, people are engaged in the debate over patent rights.
I think that the public doesn't understand in the United States, in Europe. I think the public does not understand that the wealth and the high standard of living that we're enjoying is at the expense of Africans and South Americans and Central Americans and Asians. I don't think they understand that. Possibly and do you think it's, this is just a short question that I'm curious about. Do you think it's because they don't understand it or that they don't want to understand it?
With due respect to most of my friends who are doing a lot of conscientious work in various arenas of progressive politics, I think your question carries a combined answer. I think one is that they don't understand it, and I think to some extent also some people do not wish to understand it.
I guess it's unfair to make a blanket statement, because most people that I've talked to don't even consider this at all. They don't, it's not within their orientation of thought. But anyway, going back from the general, which is the continent of Africa and the problems, you are from Nigeria. Can you tell us a little bit about Nigeria? And can we see the map of Nigeria on the screen?
I do not know whether to call it the shame of it. Actually, the situation in Nigeria, or the future and the fortune of Africa, regrettably, very regrettably, is inextricably linked with the situation in Nigeria. Because of the population of that country, of almost 135 to 140 million people, makes it one of the largest countries on the African continent.
Yes,
and again, one of the richest.
Yes, we see a picture of Nigeria. Nigeria is, in terms of longitude, it's approximately in the center of Africa, maybe a little more toward the north. It's on the west coast of Africa.
It is.
And it's 140 million people. That's a huge population and large in comparison to its landmass.
In fact, what the British did, the British as the country that colonized Nigeria, what it did was to lump what people would describe as almost 4 nations together. Mm-hmm. The Edo people of Nigeria were in ancient times a nation of their own. The Yoruba people of Nigeria, the Yorubas and the Edo people of Nigeria, I'm talking of them in the southwest of the country. Mm-hmm. The Yoruba people were a nation of their own. In fact, the Yorubas, the territory of the Yoruba kingdom, if it can be so described, spread into other parts of West Africa. Of course, as of today, you know, in Brazil and in Cuba, you have a very, very large population of Yorubas. Then, then the Hausa Fulanis, they are a nation of their own. The Igbos, but because the British have always been very horrendous in map drawing, because there is no place in the world where the British drew map, where there is peace today, whether in Palestine or in anywhere in the Middle East or in Africa, no, wherever the British made maps, they left crisis behind. So what the British did was, in 1914, they did what was called the amalgamation, you know, the tying together the north and south of Nigeria, forcing almost all the different groups of people, and called it Nigeria. I mean, it is an artificial political contraption.
I see.
It is. We're talking of the Yoruba people alone. If they were to become members of the United Nations today, they would be the 13th largest nation at the United Nations. So Nigeria is almost 4 different countries, but the size of the country is not the problem. I mean, we want to see, where possible, the United States of the whole of Africa. That is not our problem. But the size of Nigeria, the wealth of Nigeria, the unimaginable human and material resources that nation is blessed with, has not been put to the use and to the advantage of black humanity. It has not at all. In fact, people on the West Africa sub-region of Africa are very afraid, because if war breaks out in Nigeria today, it is said that the refugee outflow from Nigeria would destabilize at least 2 West African countries. Yes, because of the population, which means you're going to have millions of people moving into Ghana or into Sierra Leone. Into those countries will not be able to cope with the refugee outflow from Nigeria. But also the political history of Nigeria, it became independent in 1960.
How long did Britain colonize Nigeria?
Oh, for a very long time. It came in various forms with their statesmen, and because it did not colonize, there was no geopolitical entity called Nigeria. So it had pieces of the place, but did what was called amalgamation of the whole place to be called Nigeria in 1914. But it became independent in 1960. Of course, the way the whole process was shaped when the British finally considered under pressure, pressure from from the politicians, in which the Nigerian working class, the Nigerian labor movement, played a very crucial role. That you will not find in a lot of history books. It will look as if it was only the politicians who played an active part in bringing the British on its knees to concede independence to Nigeria. At various stages, the struggle was very, very difficult. But after the Second World War, those who went to war, fighting for what they call the Allied forces. Of course, I am sure that most of those who went to war on behalf of the Allied group in the Second World War are back. They are there. I'm not sure that the remunerations that have been given to their colleagues in Europe and America, that those who went in Africa ever got such benefits. Yes, I'm sure they were just sent home and abandoned after the yes.
Believe it or not, we only have about a minute left to this show.
Okay. Of the show?
For this half hour.
Okay.
So,
I didn't know.
So tell our audience what you would like to see, what a vision, what a realistic vision that might possibly happen for the continent of Africa, and what we as people in the United States can do to help that.
The independence and the liberation of Africa will come predominantly from African people. It will have to adopt a political and economic system that will be most beneficial to the people of Africa. Neoliberalism will not work. There must be a complete rejection of all the prescriptions of the IMF and the World Bank. Indeed, we continue to say, and I want to say it again on this program, that the debt that African nations are said to be owing, running into billions of dollars, are not politically justifiable, and they are not economically defensible, which means those debts should be reneged on by the African nations.
Very good point to end on. Thank you very much for watching.
Urukut lay mwala do